Alright, let's just double check that you guys can hear me okay. Nice. What would the final test look like? I actually have no idea yet, Yulia. I have to check it. So, this is the thing. So, I took over Jess's course just around the same time as I assumed a new role at work. So, I didn't have a lot of time to go over Jess's course entirely to see exactly what everything would look like. So, I still have no idea. But that final test, though, I'm going to take a look at it and see what it is. What I've done this week, though, is I took my other program, like the other PHP class, and I've put them on schedule with you guys. So now everything you guys are going to learn in the next few weeks, they're going to learn in the next few weeks as well. So it's very likely that the final test, depending on what Jess has for you, might be different. I might actually change it. The way I generally do final tests is they are a practical. It's a 3-hour practical. It's open book, it's open internet, and it's open chat. So you can actually communicate amongst each other as well. The whole idea is that it replicates what you would see in the industry, so that when you go to a job and you're working and you have a question because you're trying to solve a problem, you can reach out to another person and ask that question, right? Keeping in mind, though, I've presented this test to every semester I've ever had. The success rate is pretty good, but people go in extremely optimistic. I don't wind up with a lot of 100%. I think it's because a lot of people are like, oh, you know, buddy will help me, I'm good. But surprisingly enough, it's hard to get support from other people when they're busy trying to figure it out themselves. So just keep that in mind, that studying is still very important, and you need to go through that process to make sure you're ready. Speaking of tests, let's talk a little bit about Quiz 8. So a lot of people had some issues with Quiz 8. I wasn't expecting my email to blow up as much as it did. It's like Quiz 8 was trending. So a lot of people had issues. I tried to resolve the issues with them over email as much as I could, but what I wound up doing was pulling the test open, fixing the fill-in-the-blank questions, because the fill-in-the-blank questions, when an instructor creates it, if they create it with an answer that has to be a one-to-one response, meaning you have to answer it exactly as it is, it can cause some issues. Like even just a misplaced space can cause an issue with how it gets answered. So it does support regular expression as well. So what I've done is gone through and updated all those answers to regular expressions so that they would support multiple types of answers. For example, there was one that was talking about, what was it now? Encryption, right? And some people wrote encrypt, some people wrote encryption, and some people wrote encrypting. So because those 3 possible answers were there, some of you got them wrong. The answer was encryption, but some of you got it wrong, some of you got it right. So what I did was I wrote a little bit of regular expression that would allow for all 3 types of answers, and then let it regrade. Same thing with a bunch of the other ones. There was some that were saying about server sessions, right? So that was a big one. Where do I place session start? And I got about 4 emails that were asking that same question, because they had written that session start can go anywhere, and Jess had it that it was wrong, and it makes sense from her perspective, but you need to understand exactly why it would be considered wrong. It's not necessarily wrong, it's just not common convention. And the reason why it's not common convention to put session start wherever you want is because if you're writing a file, like a script file that dips in and out of HTML, and then you try plugging in session start after you're outputting a chunk of HTML or some sort of echo statement or some kind of output, it will blow up. And the reason it will blow up is because you can't call session start after headers have been sent. You need to call it before the headers have been sent. And headers are automatically created and sent the second you output something to the browser. So common convention for most PHP developers is to put session start at the top of the file. If you program like I do, where your HTML won't necessarily be nested with your PHP, you try to keep those 2 things as separate as possible, you will find yourself needing to call session start somewhere later, because it doesn't make sense to start it if you're not going to use it. So you might do a bunch of validation checks or some kind of due diligence and then start it on line 35. that is valid. That's a perfectly valid scenario. So I don't want you to think that it always has to go at the beginning. Really, the proper question should have been, if headers have been pre-sent, where do we start our session? And that should be always the answer at the top of the page, so that it's before the headers have been sent. So hopefully that clarifies that a little bit. I think I cleaned up most of the answers. If for some reason you got it wrong, I think I might have screwed over some people because I accidentally fixed the true or false one so that it was like that where it says you can start sessions anywhere and the answer was supposed to be false. I set it to true, and I think I might have screwed some people over. So just send me a message if that happened to be you, and then I'll just go in and manually change your grade. Because I don't want to give it to you wrong, considering Jess taught it as that way. But just keep in mind for your own future reference, session starts can be started anywhere, providing you haven't already sent the headers. Okay, that's the solid rule. All right, there was something else too. Oh, tonight. So normally you guys have a quiz every week, right? You're not going to have a quiz tonight, and you won't have the lab that was originally scheduled for tonight. And here's the reason why. So the lesson for tonight was put out that it's an API lesson. So we're doing an API. You're going to learn about APIs tonight and how to work with APIs. That's tonight's lesson. The problem with that is that the test, like the quiz and the lab, were about user authentication. So not about APIs. So because they're not about that, and I didn't have time to create a new lab and a new quiz, I was like, forget it, we'll just postpone those, because next week you have 2 weeks in a row on authentication. So we're just going to do 2 weeks in a row on authentication with 2 quizzes and 2 labs, which works out anyways because my other class is way behind on labs and quizzes, so I got to do that anyways. So that's what we'll do. We'll do the same scenario. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. Otherwise, yeah, I'm sure everybody can appreciate the 1 week break of not having quizzes or labs. I don't do, like I used to do quizzes every week, and I used to do a lab every week as well. So you would wind up with 10 labs, 10 quizzes, and then you would have 2 weeks of like kind of whatever you wanted to do. But just now with working remotely, it's so intense and there's so much work involved. And then plus with 4 classes, the amount that I have to mark is like outstanding, right? Because that's literally 80 things every week. And that's just a little too much. Not that I'm lazy, but I'm lazy. All right, cool. So tonight we are going to talk about APIs, but before that we'll talk a little bit about what we were doing last week. Incidentally, I did start marking. So I marked most of your guys' lab 3. I haven't got into the phase tests. A lot of you have been sending me emails with your labs in them and your phase 1 projects in them. Please don't do that. Instead, what I will do is I will change the close date so that the close date doesn't close out the lab or close out the phase 1 project, so that you can still submit whenever you want. However, keep in mind though that Jess has set due dates, and if you're beyond the due date, it is considered late. So even though you can still submit, doesn't mean that you won't be penalized for a late submission. Just keep that in mind. But I will open them up. Don't send me emails, because what happens is Blackboard actually strickens out the zip files sometimes. So what can happen is you sent this file, you think I can get it, but I can't open it because Blackboard's done something stupid with it, and now I can't open it. Or sorry, not Blackboard, Georgian's email server. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't work sending me emails. So if that is you and that applies to you, I will respond to the emails I received to let you know. But please make sure you submit via Blackboard, even if it's late. It's just better to submit through Blackboard, okay? Anyways, going through the search things, everything seems cool. So far, I don't think anybody really suffered that bad. The one thing I will note, though, about search in general that you should be aware of is when you create a search field, and a lot of you did this, when you create a search field, it's a good idea to tell people what they're searching for, right? So some of you had a search field, and you'd be like, search my database. And it's like, but I'm not, right? I'm only searching one of those fields. Which field is it? So without pulling open your code, I'm guessing, right? And obviously your user isn't going to be able to pull open your code. So it's usually a good idea to create a better user experience by saying, you know, this is the thing that you're allowed to search for, okay? So it's items, or it's products, or it's by first name or last name or something like that. That's another thing, first name, last name. If you're building search and you want people to be able to search for a person, they're going to want to be able to search by first name or last name. If you're not sure how to implement it where you can actually search by first name and last name, then you should actually implement just searching by last name, because that is the more common approach, right? That's a better user experience in that scenario. Some of you did orders where you could actually look up an order, but what was weird is a lot of you actually made it where you're looking up the order based on the product they ordered, right? Which is kind of bizarre. I wouldn't really look up an order by a product. I would look up an order by either the person's name, their contact information, so their email or their phone number, or the order number, right? The order number makes the most amount of sense. Look up the user's order number and then be able to find the order. So just keep that in mind. I didn't deduct marks for those things, but I likely wrote a note. If I didn't write a note, just keep that in mind for you. How to search with 2 or more words? Yeah, I can show you how to search with 2 or more words. It's not too bad. And how to filter them? Yeah, now we're getting into a whole lesson, Yulia. That's basically like a whole class. If we got to do all that stuff. I do have search tonight, though. So we have a little bit of a search tonight. And let me see, is it... and it searches by 2 words. So there you go. So I'll show you that. Not filtering, but I will show you how to search by 2 words. You kind of already do filtering anyways, because you filter by the where clause, right? So when you're writing your where clause, if you wanted to provide a filter, you could actually add that to your where clause, you know. So where f name starts with the letter S, for example, and you could filter down a data set based on that, right? So it's the same kind of idea. Filter and search are basically the same. They work as basically the same, yeah. There's not really much difference. But yeah, we'll be covering search tonight anyways. I did that on purpose. So, just a precursor to tonight's lesson, and kind of an apology, but maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a good thing, not a bad thing. I misunderstood what Jess wanted to teach in APIs. What I had assumed she meant by APIs was like RESTful APIs, which is where you connect to an external source and they provide you a set of endpoints that you're allowed to use so that you can perform CRUD operations like create, read, update, or delete. And at the time that I was reading, I was like, that's a little advanced, but you know what, whatever, we'll simplify it, we'll make it easy enough to understand. So I went all for it. So this weekend, I had to write a lesson because I don't actually teach APIs in this course. I teach APIs in the JavaScript Frameworks course, where you've already kind of had some groundwork before we actually hit it. So I was like, okay, whatever. So I created a super simple API for tonight that we're going to create together. It gives you like a full RESTful API using controller systems and actually doing routing interpretation. So I realize you don't know what those terms mean, but you're going to learn them tonight. However, that's not what she was talking about. What she meant by APIs, now that I kind of understand more, I don't have example code from Jess, so I'm only kind of going based on her slide deck. But based on her slide deck, I think what she meant by APIs is like the built-in libraries that PHP provides. And there's a whole bunch of them, right? So for example, PDO would be considered an API. It's a built-in library that allows you to be able to access complex logic through a very simplified interface. That's the whole idea of an API. I want to access very complex logic, but I don't want to learn how it works under the hood. Give me something simple so that I can work with it. And that's where you come into APIs, application programming interfaces, which are kind of like a gateway into this complex logic through a simplified method or function or class or whatever, okay? So we're going to still kind of do that, but in a slightly different way. I'll let you guys go over the cool things. I started doing that with the other class just because when we went over the cool things, we lost like 20 minutes of our lesson. So I want the cool things to go to you guys. You guys just look those up and you have access to the slide deck, so just feel free to review those. Week 8 review, we'll talk quickly about week 8. What is an API we'll get into. Then we'll build our API. We will be integrating a third-party API, but not the one that Jess suggests. The one that she suggested was the Google Search API. However, in order to implement the Google Search API, you have to have a Gmail account. You will have to register an application with Gmail or with Google themselves. That will give you a token and a secret, and then we'll have to implement that into our applications, and it's a huge rigmarole, right? So instead, we're going to use the Chuck Norris API, which is a very simple API, doesn't require tokens. It's just basically reach out, access the API endpoint, and then take that data and display it. That's it. So you guys will still learn about third-party APIs. And then recap the week. I mean, if we reach the end and we can recap, we will, but if not, it doesn't really matter. Alright, so like I said, you guys can go over the cool things. So, week 8 review was form validation. So, we talked about sanitizing, normalizing user data, right? And also validating user data. And we were using a lot of the PDO helpful methods that we were able to do so that it would actually do sanitization and filtering for us. However, we did have to write some custom validations, right? We had to write the custom validation for what was it? For checking whether or not a response is empty. We had to write some custom validations to verify that, you know, the responses were in the correct formats and things like that. So we did a little bit of custom validation, but a lot of it was just utilizing the PDO framework, which gave us a lot of our helpful hints, right? So for example, like when we want to filter, when we want to validate email integers or URLs, we can use the filter validate email or filter validate int or filter validate URL. When we want to sanitize data before we put it in the database, we can use PDO param string or PDO param int, for example. And if we want to sanitize anything else, we can actually even just directly explicitly call filter sanitize and then whatever the data type is to force it to be that data type. Incidentally, last week we used the bind params with the filter string on the end of it. It is kind of like double duty, basically. So you're calling filter once already, filter sanitize blah, but then you're sanitizing anyways when you go to bind parameters. When you look at tonight's code, we're only writing 3 of the functions. 2 of the other 3 functions I'm providing you already. So I'll be providing you create, update, and delete. However, the first 3, index, show, and search, we're going to write together. The only reason being is because create, read, update, and delete are obviously monolithic functions that need to be written, and I don't want to have to write them out from scratch. So make sure you review that code, but we'll probably review that code together, especially now that I look at it, because there's some types of complex logic in there, like this. Does anybody know what that is? Out of curiosity? I'll just put it in the chat in case you're trying to figure out what the heck I'm talking about. PHP is one of the few, absolute few programming languages that supports that. Yeah, you would think it was like money required or something. No, it is a variable, but it's a specific type of variable. Ignore the word required. It doesn't have anything to do with it. No, not a reference variable. A reference variable would be this. That's a reference variable. Nobody knows? It's called a variable variable. Okay? So say I have $required equals name, right? And I want to create a variable, but I don't know what the value of required is, but I know that I want a variable with that particular name. I can use a variable variable like this. And now I can actually modify the value of name by just doing $required equals, you know, Sean or something like that. And then if I ever want to output the value, I can do that, because it now has become a variable. So they're called variable variables. And PHP is one of the few languages that supports it. JavaScript unfortunately doesn't support it, but it does support object property overloading so that you can actually, you know, change a value out and use that almost dynamically. Ruby has something similar to this as well, But again, it's very different. PHP is one of the unique languages that allows you to do variable variables. And they're kind of cool. Anyways, I used variable variables in some of my logic. Like, for example, for doing checks to see if something is required. So here's an example of that. I passed an array of fname, lname, and email, and I want to check to see if they're all required. So I'm iterating through these, casting them to this variable called required. So now what I can do to check to see if they're required is I can call $$ required. Now I already have a variable called fname, lname, and email that have been predefined using that filter input syntax, and this is my way of being able to check those values. So I check the values, I check that they're not false, and then I can go ahead and just use it. So it's kind of a cool little thing. If we have time at the end, I will show you how they work. Otherwise, that's my 30-second lesson on them. They're not going to show up on a test, so don't worry about that. It was just because, if you remember when we were doing validation, sanitization, and normalization, we wind up with these very monolithic variable checks, right? And if your variables get bigger, like if you wind up with more inputs, then those checks become even more massive. And I noticed that some of you have inside your projects, because I know some of you handed in your project as your lab 3, but some of those projects are massive. Like you have, I think somebody had 10 different inputs on their actual input field. Checking those one by one is just asinine, right? You don't want to do that. So it's much easier to iterate through a for each loop and do it, but then you need some way to check the variables themselves, right? So the easiest way to do that is by using variable variables. Does that make sense? Kinda? Doesn't have to right now. That's not important. Alright, so we talked about the importance of validating and why we do it. We also talked hugely about the importance of why client-side validation is completely useless. Well, it's not useless, it's only really good for UX, UI, right? It's not really good for actual validating anything, because at the end of the day, the user can completely thwart it, so it's irrelevant anyways. So we always have to do server-side validation if we don't want to get hacked, or we don't want a moron sticking moronic data in our database, then we always have to make sure we do server-side validation so that we can avoid those problems. Hopefully you guys got that by the end of the whole lesson last week. So, what is an API? Well, an API, what does the acronym stand for? Does anybody know? I already said it once, so maybe you already heard it, but what does API stand for? Dead air. just dead air. Oh, there we go. Yes, application programming interface. That is true. Everybody's sending it to me privately. Don't send it to me privately. Just say it out loud. Yes, application programming interface. So if any of you actually worked with an API before, have you ever actually had to connect to it? And oh, okay. Yeah, WebEx can be annoying. What? That's so weird. Yeah, I probably can. It's funny, they limit the actual... Hold on, I have to stop sharing to do that. Allow attendees to unmute themselves. Anyone can share. Assign privileges. It's set to everyone. Oh, weird. It was like a little dash across it. I don't usually see that. Huh. Yeah, something glitched. There we go. So now you should be able to, except for now I have to reopen participants in chat and then move them around the page. I don't like WebEx. In fact, I don't really like any of the screencast kind of applications. I find them all buggy. Google used to have this really bad thing, like Google Hangouts, where if you had more than one monitor running at the same time and then you were running Google Hangouts in one of them, it would cause the other monitor to lag. And Zoom, I've noticed, has been doing that lately. Like if somebody is doing a Zoom call and then they do they actually share their screen, it causes all the participants' computers to start jittering, and you can't even move your mouse fluidly. And I've noticed that a couple of times when you guys have shared. I have the same issue. The mouse starts jittering around the page, or your mouse starts jittering around the page. But yeah, it's kind of weird. Yeah. The hatred against multi-monitors needs to stop. Yes, 100%. Jeez, let's be inclusive. So have any of you actually worked with... So some of you did answer that question already. No, you didn't. Have any of you actually worked with an API before? Have you ever used one? Like Google Maps? Have you implemented Google Maps into anything? Or Scott, you've used Code Academy? Jesse, you've done it before? Nice. Awesome. Yeah, so that's the thing. Once you get in the industry, you're going to do it all the time. You're going to be constantly connecting to APIs, mostly because you don't want to rewrite code, right? So either you're going to utilize libraries that already exist and bring them down so that you can create cool things, or you're going to connect to endpoints so that you can pull data from resources, right? Like, for example, say you needed to look up books, right? And you wanted to get the ISBN numbers, the authors, all that type of information. You're definitely not going to go to, Indigo or to Chapters or something like that and look up every book and then write down the ISBN and write down the author and all that information. Because guess what? It already exists, and there's hundreds of different APIs that are out there. A lot of them are free. A lot of them don't even require like token IDs or even authentication of any sort. They're just completely open APIs that you can connect to, and you can access that data for completely free. Same with like IMDb. IMDb actually has an open API that allows you to be able to access movie information. I've had many students in the past use IMDb's API in order to pull movie information. It just seems to be like the go-to. But yeah, APIs, super cool things. Very simple to work with. If you get me for JavaScript, I'm not sure if I'm going to teach again. I haven't decided yet. But if you get me for JavaScript frameworks, we use the Marvel API. We actually connect to Marvel, and we pull character data down so that you can actually do a search for like the Hulk, for example, and pull every version of the Hulk down with images, actually, which is pretty cool. So API is super fundamental and handy to have in your arsenal of knowledge. The other thing to note as well, that an API isn't necessarily just external, right? It's not necessarily just connecting to Google and pulling in Google Maps or Code Academy or anything for that matter, right? Or even like doing it to Discord, like because Discord has an API, and I know lots of people that use the Discord API. Those are considered RESTful APIs or SOAP APIs, but either way, they're an external API where it's an application that somebody has built a front interface for that allows you to be able to access certain pieces of data, but in a very controlled environment. And that's a super important part of that. It's controlled, right? You can only access the 15 endpoints they provide. You can't access more than that. You can only access what they're allowing you to access, and you can only do it in the way that they've outlined that you're able to do it in, right? So they control that. You're not actually connecting to their database directly. You're not manipulating that database directly. You're only working through a middleman, basically, like a little middleman that kind of facilitates how your request is going to function. Okay, so that's an important thing to understand. The other important side to that is obviously outside of REST, we also have other types of APIs. Like for example, JavaScript has many APIs already built in, and they're actually built right into your browser. One of them being POW, for example, right? So you give POW 2 pieces of information, and it actually performs the powered calculation for you, right? Or for example, Seal is another one, right? Seal pushes up. There's also round and all that. So the math library is one of them. The DOM, right? The DOM is another one. There's a whole DOM API. Each of these things you see populating this list here are all API endpoints. There's also audio APIs. There's the geolocation API, which I think is built right in. Yep. Geolocation API that's built right in that allows you to access different aspects of geolocations. For example, like a user's location. They have to authorize it, but you can access that information. That's all an API as well. So that's under the hood API components. PHP also has API libraries as well, like the PDO library that we use obviously is an API. But in addition to that, they also have some libraries that interface ImageMagick, which is a very common image processing library. But it's very tricky to work with, right? It requires you to understand how images work implicitly or explicitly. And that's the thing that can be a little bit intense because there's a lot of things that you fundamentally don't know about a pixel or about the depths of pixels. So PHP actually has a library called the GD library that completely wraps that and makes it easier for you to work with image processing. That's also an API, right? But not necessarily a RESTful API. So just keep that in mind, that APIs, really the whole purpose of them, if I was explaining it to a 5-year-old, I mean, I wouldn't explain it to a 5-year-old, but if I was to explain it to a 5-year-old, it would be a very simple thing to access something that isn't simple. That's my 3-second explanation. A simple thing to access something that isn't simple. So there you go. So what is an API? Something that is made available in programming languages that help developers create complex functionality more easily. Yep, that's true. A way to abstract more complex code and provide easier code. That is also very true. How do APIs work? Based on objects. They can be. Not always, though. Sometimes an API might just be a bunch of library functions that you pull down, and it's just a list of functions. I think what she means is that a lot of APIs, like, for example, the GD library that's built into PHP, it's a class. You instantiate it, and then you can create your methods from that. However, PHP also has very simplified methods that alias that class that do a lot of stuff for you, but aren't necessarily a part of an object, right? Have recognizable entry points. Yes, if we're following, for example, a specific paradigm like REST, then yeah, we should definitely have recognizable entry points. If you say my application is a RESTful API, people kind of assume it to function in a certain way. So if you kind of break that mold and go your own path and do whatever it is that you want to do, then you might get a bit of pushback on it, right? The idea of a RESTful API is that we use HTTP request methods in order to determine what it is that we want. So get and post are the most common two, right? Get for retrieving data, post for manipulating or modifying data. But then there's other ones like put and patch, which are usually used for updating resources, right? So updating a record in a database. Delete, which is, obviously used for removing data from a database. But then there's also other things like head, for example. Head can be done if you're only trying to pull back some piece of information. It's taking advantage of those HTTP request methods in order to get the information you want, right? But then there are patterns to how the paths work as well, so that when you create a request through a URL, your path is formatted in a certain way to work with that REST API for you to get that data back. But the most direct point, because every framework ever seems to do it differently. They don't all do it the same way, but they all do implement HTTP methods in order to request data. Use events to handle changes in state. Yes, that can definitely be a huge thing. So in PHP, for example, you may be using a library that has on events. Like, for example, the AWS SDK. If you're working with it, and you want to say add a file to S3, there's all these events that you can hook into. You can be like, okay, well, I want my client .on an error to execute this function. That's literally how it reads. So that, if you're doing an S3, some sort of S3 manipulation, and it causes it to blow up, that error will be caught. And on that error, you can log out to some sort of logging service or something like that. So PHP doesn't necessarily give you that ability. It doesn't really have the whole publish subscribe paradigm, you would have to create that. I can't think of any libraries off the top of my head in PHP that use events. I could be wrong though. Like I said, PHP I teach. I don't use in my day-to-day. I haven't used it in my day-to-day in a really long time. But I don't remember there being events. JavaScript, however, tons of events. Everything's event-driven. So, yeah, libraries will often have events that you can listen to and then trigger responses based on that. Sometimes, if you're working with a RESTful API, and I actually just built this in a RESTful API recently, you can create hooked events, which is where you send a request to the API and you provide it an endpoint to respond to. And then when it's done doing its process, it responds to that endpoint. The convenience of that is instead of you having to constantly go, hey, are you done yet? 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 Like a 5-year-old looking for a cookie. You can actually just say, you know what? When you're done, send back to this address, and then I'll execute some sort of functionality once you've done that. Those are usually called hooks, right? Or a post-back request. Additional security mechanisms. Yeah, this is a big part of APIs. The fact that you control the security, right? So you're not just giving people a library of functions, you're actually interfacing another set of functionality. And perhaps there's some vulnerabilities in that functionality. Well, your API should likely take care of those vulnerabilities so that people can't exploit them. So that is a big thing, right? Like, for example, if you're building a RESTful API, you're creating this like step between you and your database. You're going to sanitize, you're going to filter, you're going to validate so that people can't take advantage of things like cross-site scripting or SQL injection, right? You're preventing that from happening by having this kind of middle piece or middleware blocking them from interfacing directly with your database. So building a simple API, we're not going to do the Google reCAPTCHA, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's it. Cool. Let's X out. All right, so I did provide some code. And I also provided this Hopscotch browser extension. So last night, I was trying to get everybody to be able to actually access their API through something other than the client I provide you, right? Because the client I provide you is a PHP application. You're like, okay, so PHP can talk to PHP. Awesome. But the whole point of a RESTful API is that any application can talk to it, okay? So it doesn't matter what the client is, like whether it's Steam or Origin or your browser or whatever, you should be able to talk to that server as long as you have those request endpoints. However, because we're using localhost, which is on HTTP, Hopscotch tends to throw an error saying that it's mixed content because Hopscotch is responding from an HTTPS schema. So in order to avoid that, there is a browser extension you can install. It looks like a little spacecraft that's sucking up people. Anyways, if you click on that and install that into Chrome, if you're not using Chrome, you'll have to look it up. There is a Firefox one as well. But if you install that into Chrome, then we can easily use Hopscotch tonight. You don't have to, it's not a requirement, but I will be using it just to demonstrate how the thing works on something other than a PHP website. Otherwise, click on the starter files and let's pull those down. Once you've got them, go ahead and extract them. So I'm going to go to extract them in the same place I did last week. So my Comp 1006 Wednesday folder, and I'm going to create a new folder inside there called Lesson-09. Not sure if you guys know this, but we only have 3 classes left after this one. That's it. And actually, hold on. So we have 31st and the 7th. Come on, go down. 31st, the 7th, and the 14th. Yeah, so 3 full classes, and then on the 14th... No, wait. I'm wrong. 31st, the 7th, the 14th. Yeah, so 3 classes in a row, and then on the 21st, we have our final. And then we're done. I lost my folder. There it is. So yeah, I created my Lesson 9 folder. I'm going to extract into here. I know! Same! Felt like we just met. Yeah. So there is a folder inside here as well. Like if you double click it, there's these 2 folders. If you want to grab them and move them up the directory into the lesson 9 directory, I'm okay with that. Or if you want to leave them in the API example student folder, you can do that as well. I don't care either way. You can't find the files. So you're in week 9, March 24th, right, Mitty? And then you'll see a folder that says code examples. Click on code examples and you'll see starter files. Did you find them? It's like, where's Waldo? You gotta look for the toque. Mitty, give me some feedback. Did you find them? You can't find them under code examples? Are you in a different shell altogether? Which group are you in? 3 or 2? Like, are you in PHP group 3 or are you in PHP group 2? Okay, if you're in PHP group 2, the shell isn't any different than any other person's shell. They should all be the same. Oh, yeah, that would do it. Yeah. Yeah, if you weren't under the PHP folder and you were in some other one, then yeah, that would definitely do it. No, technically there is. So I don't know why the college does this. It's so obnoxious. So like I've got 2 groups for each one of my classes here. This one is the one that says Jessica, Gilfillan, and Sean is the one that we're using. And then the second one is just me. That one should be empty. I think I did publish something stupid in it. Yeah, I published one in there. You know what? I'll delete that so that it's never confusing again. There you go. So if you land on the one that has nothing in it, you're in the wrong shell. The one you want to be in is in the Jessica, Gilfillan, and Sean McKinnon one. That's the one you want to be in. The reason is because all of your grades are in this shell. So when I mark, I didn't want to have to port over all of your grades. So it just makes sense to just use her shells. Yeah, no worries. That's fine. All right, so once you do that, MIDI, you're just going to click on starter files, and then you're going to extract them into your www directory under a folder. So that's an important step. I know some people had issues with it last week. They didn't understand that the folders that they were downloading need to be moved to their web server. You have to move those folders to your web server or it won't work, right? It won't load. The web server is the thing that's doing all of the work. Okay, and then once you have your files in there, right-click, choose to open with code, or whatever particular editor you're working with. And we are ready to start. So I have created a client for you. However, the client is broken out of the box. So I'm going to navigate to this. So mine is localhost comp-1006-wed-02. And the reason I know that, just in case, because sometimes people don't know this, if I go to my C drive WAMP64WW, I have a directory called comp1006-wed02. The local disk WAMP64WW directory is aliased under this local host. Right? So it's almost as if you're going to that C drive, but you don't want to go to the C drive directly, because if you did, if I click in here and I hit Control-C and I load that into my browser, and then I navigate into the Wednesday 02, and then I navigate into Lesson 9, and I go into my client, notice that the page didn't just auto-load, And then if I click index.php, oh, now I see text. Why am I seeing text? Can anybody tell me why I'm seeing text? Why am I seeing text instead of a rendered page? Exactly. I didn't go through Apache. Because I'm going directly to the path directory, this is like just loading any file on your hard drive, right? You have to go through Apache, so you need this local host to represent that C:/WAMP64 www, right? Other words, just like Alex says, there's no server, so it doesn't know what to do with it. And the browser is stupid. The browser's dumb. It's like, I don't know what PHP is. Must be text. So it renders it as text, right? Which is not what you want. Now if I go to lesson 9 in client, it loads up. You're definitely going to get some errors. Let me see if I can force my errors, because I know why you're getting errors. So you're getting errors for the same reason. If I was to remove this base URL, you're getting these errors, correct? File get contents failed to open stream. Yeah. So the reason is because the path that we're working with is wrong. So let's go get the correct path. The correct path, I'm going to duplicate my tab here. I'm just right-clicking and choosing duplicate. And I'm going to change the word client to API. That should work. That should be blank for you. Okay? I'm going to copy that address, right? My API address. And I'm going to fill it out in my base endpoint. So I'm under the index.php client, index.php. Make sure you're under client index.php and not API index.php. So I'm filling this out. I'm adding in the proper endpoint here, and I'm going to save it. And if I go back to my client and refresh, now I've only got a couple of errors. You should get this trying to get property value of non-object error, and then this other error down here where this table is. And those are the two errors that you should have. Yeah. So the base endpoint is literally our API endpoint. Notice it's an external. I realize it's not actually external, but let's play pretend a little bit. Remember when you used to do that as a kid? Playing pretend, this is an external link to some outside source. It's different for everyone, Mitty. That's why I didn't paste it. Oh, do you mean... So, yeah, I can't paste it, really, because it's different for everyone. I mean, unless you have the exact same directory structure I do, it's going to be different. That's the directory structure I'm working with. So that would be the equivalence to C:/WAMP64/comp-1006 -wed-02 lesson-09/API. So that would be what it would be the equivalence to. You would have to have that same directory structure. If you have that same directory structure, then that URL I just posted will work. No, you'll be writing it in your index.php page under client. So it's under client. Client/index.php. And then it would be that block there. So that's it for now. We're going to put the client away. And yes, I know there's some errors there, but we're just going to leave it. Okay? We're going to ignore it for now. Where we're going to focus our attention is building our API itself, right? So the API is going to be the part that allows us to be able to provide a service to someone and access our data, right? But we want to control that access. We don't want to let them just grab any data they want. We want to control how they actually access the data. However, there are some issues that we need to address before we allow that. One of them is I don't want to make my API so complex and difficult for a user that they don't want to use it. And one of the ways that can be very difficult is by using query parameters to control what data you are responding with. So what some APIs will do, and I think the Chuck Norris API kind of does this, what some APIs would do is they would have our API endpoint, right? Just pretend localhost comp 1006 blah 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 is all in front of it. We'll just start there. They'll have our API input, and then they'll want to hit the index.php page, right? When they hit, that's what we're hitting right now, is this index.php page. Then they'll add a question mark. The first thing they'll do is they'll say, okay, the resource is some sort of table in my database. So we'll say it's contacts. Okay, so I'm using the contacts resource in my database. Okay, that's fine. And then they'll want to add another query key called action, and whatever action it is they're attempting to do. So maybe they only want to retrieve one of the records. So generally we call that action show. Okay, so they want to access one record. And then they want to access a record with a specified ID. So they give us an ID, and there's our entire endpoint in order to access that particular action. Kind of gross. Maybe you don't think so, because I know you guys are new to this, so it's kind of learning it. But I prefer very clean URLs that kind of already set up that kind of operation. So the way I would like it to look would be like this. So API. This is not in a file I'm working in. I just opened a random file just to demonstrate. You don't need to type this, Yulia. So API, then after a slash, the name of my resource, one more slash, the name of my action, one more slash, the name of my parameter list. See how much cleaner that is compared to that? And if you work with a lot of APIs, this is more common. This is what you will see overseeing this. And basically the way it breaks down is you have your root, your resource, your action, and your params. That's the way it breaks down. So you have a root, then your resource. Let's change these to pipe characters here. So you'll have your root, which is the slash API, your resource, right, which is contacts, your action here, and then your params. Okay? So I want ours to look like this, but the problem is it's difficult to make it look like that using PHP the way it's built, right? PHP doesn't work like that. So one way around that is to create those folders. We could create a contacts folder. We could create a show folder with an index page in it that only does show. And we could create a folder for parameters, right? So that we can go and dig down all the way through. But when we hit this folder, that's when we're going to have some problems. Because I would have to literally create a folder for every single user in my database, every single contact. And I don't want to do that. So how can we fix this so we don't have to do that? Well, what we can do is we can do something called rewrites. We can do URL rewriting. And essentially what that allows us to do is allow the user to plug anything they want into this path, and we hijack that information and then process it. So we can take that path information, read it, and then do something based on the information that's inside that path. So this is not going to wind up on a test, just to give you a heads up. But we need to work with something called an Htaccess file. So this is a new file that we're opening up that you guys are going to edit. So open up your .htaccess file. Hopefully you can see it. Some IDEs hide hidden files. If you have the hidden files turned on, you may have to enable viewing hidden files in Windows if you cannot see the Htaccess file. Hopefully you can. So as it says, this is the blood and guts of our routing. Okay, so what is routing? Routing is where we take the URL that a user has typed into a browser, and then we interpret it. We look at that URL and we try to better understand what it is they're looking for. Then using that information, we go get the information that they want and we send back a response. That's called routing. So I'm oversimplifying it just so you're aware, but that is essentially routing. So what we want to do is we want to build our Htaccess file to take any URL that goes to the API endpoint and hijack it. And then we want to send that information to index.php. So it doesn't matter what they type into this URL, as long as it ends in this, at least has this part as the beginning. Anything after that point, we're going to hijack it and send it to index.php. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our module check, because we need to make sure that the mod rewrite is turned on. If it's not turned on, then none of this works. So we're going to say, hey, I want to make sure this module exists. And the way we know this module exists is Apache will have this module turned on. If this module is off, the only way I can think of it being off is if you guys have played around with your Apache configuration settings, or if you're Scott and set up your own web server, it is potential chance that you don't have it enabled. So you may want to check that. If it is on, then we want to turn on the rewrite engine. The rewrite engine will allow us to basically not have this URL automatically end in index.php. It will allow us to keep the URL however it's configured, the way the user plugged it into the browser. Okay? So whatever they typed, we'll just keep it looking like that. And then we're going to create a rewrite rule. This rewrite rule essentially says, and we use a little bit of regex. This is a little bit of regular expression. It basically says this caret is the start. So it's at the beginning, the absolute beginning of our URL path. Then it says take anything inside our URL path. So dot star means literally everything. Every single thing there is up to the last character. So the $sign means last character. So the caret is the first starting of the sentence of the string. This is the contents of that string, right? So the whole complete contents of the string up to the end of the string. So that's going to grab that whole thing. The next thing we want to do is say, take that information and send it to index.php. And then we provide the L, which means just do it. Don't redirect. Don't send back any information like, you know, that we're doing anything weird, right? We don't need to provide the response yet. We just want to basically just do it. That's basically what L is saying. Just do it. Just take this information, take this path, and load the index.php page only. So this is going to be basically the fundamental part of our routing system. It's super important because without it, anybody types anything into this browser thing and we're going to have a problem. So I'm going to try to go to /contact/great/love htaccess/so/much and hit enter. If I hit enter and this htaccess is working properly, I don't get any errors on the page of a 404, right? Otherwise, I will get a 404 saying, hey, I don't know what you're trying to access. If I comment this out, which I don't know if I can, I kind of can. It's so annoying. I can don't you do this. You just leave yours commented in. If I comment it out and then I hit this, I'll get a 404 not found, which basically says, hey, this page doesn't exist. And the reason I'm getting the 404 is because it's not redirecting our path to our index.php. It's not sending the request to the index.php page. That's why I get the 404. You get all of it in red. You get all of what in red? Oh, when you actually type it out into your .htaccess, it's like there's an error in the IDE or in the browser? In the IDE? Just ignore it. Your IDE is being stupid. For some reason, your IDE does not understand Htaccess files. Which IDE are you using, Dimitri? Adam? Yeah, so you could try to see if you can find an extension or just change whatever it's using to do syntax highlighting to plain text. Yeah, it doesn't matter because the IDE is irrelevant. Even if it's red, it doesn't matter. The IDE doesn't dictate if our application works. Is it supposed to work on the client side? API side only, Elizabeth. So if I go to the client should still work. So if I replace API with /client, I'll still just get the 2 errors that I was getting, but I should still see, the general outline of the client. I shouldn't see nothing, meaning that it's sending the client to the index page. If it is, and you are seeing, you can't see the client, then likely what has happened is you've put your Htaccess file in this directory where the API and the client are sharing. You want to make sure that Htaccess file is in the same directory as the API, not outside of that directory. Because if I move it to outside and I refresh, I'll just get a 404 because there is no index page in here. So it'll just 404 on me. But if I put it back into my API here and refresh, everything's working fine now. So just keep that in mind. So Dimitri and Mahir, if you go to the API endpoint, though, it should still lead to a blank page. Everything is working. Is that correct? Yeah, so you're fine. It's just your IDE. Just, uninstall it and install VS Code. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. All right, so we have our page. So what wonderful things have we done here, right? What wonderful things have we created? Well, one thing, yes, we're going to the index.php, but we don't want the index.php to do all the work for us. We want to be able to take some information that they're sending to us based on the URL they're typing in, and then direct that to a specific endpoint. So we need some things in place in order to make that happen. For example, we need a very simple function to respond with the correct headers and the status code and the JSON, right? So we want to be able to respond, and we can only respond if we have that information set up. We'll do that. I have it as step 1, but we'll do it actually last. I have included your require once connect.php. I based this on our last lesson. So look at that connect.php and make sure your database credentials are correct. If they are wrong, please correct them. Okay? So that's under connect.php. Just make sure those are correct. All right? Otherwise, we're going to be working in this API index.php file. So the first thing I want to do just before we take a break, I want to just take a look at how we can actually get this path information so that we know what's going on. And the way we access that path information is by using one of the associative global arrays. I don't know if you guys know what those are yet. Have you guys worked with $_server? Yes, I did mean to not close PHP. You see, it's so funny. I've had so many students notice that, and then they're curious why PHP doesn't close at the bottom. If you're only writing script and you're not outputting HTML, there's no reason to close the PHP. It implicitly closes. If it bothers you, though, you can close it at line 39 if you want to. I don't care. So you guys haven't learned about server? So there's a whole bunch of associative, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it does. Exactly what Scott said. Get server info. It's kind of cool. You can actually output it. So if you do a var dump and then output server and refresh your page, it gives you all this information about your server, right? So, how you're connecting, like who your host is, what your status is currently, your connection strings, your cache control, tons of information. All this information is not reliable, though. It can be spoofed, it can be modified, and it can be excluded. So keep that in mind, that you may not have access to everything. However, things you should have access to, you should have access to your document root. Nobody should take that away from you. You should have access to your request URI as well, wherever it has disappeared to. Am I blind? I must be blind. Yeah, there it is. Request URI. So those are the two keys that we need to make everything work for us. We need those pieces of information because we're going to create something called an intersect, which basically removes information we don't need and leaves us with information that we do need. Because what we want to be able to do is have /API /contacts /show /123 and have that work so that we can grab that information. If you look at the request URI, it loads that information for us. And if we look at document root, not document root, PHP self. Where's PHP self? Why isn't this in alphabetical order? There it is, PHP self. You can see that the differences between these two are this comp1006/API, which is where we're executing from. So what we want to do is remove that piece from the request URI. And so that all we have left is /contacts /show /123. So the easiest way to do that, we're going to create a variable called resolved path. And we're going to use the function string replace. String replace takes 3 arguments. The first argument is the needle, which is the thing you're looking for. The second argument is the thing you want to replace the needle with. Okay? And then the third thing is the haystack, where you want to look for the needle. So needle, the thing you're looking for, the thing you want to replace it with, and then the haystack, which is the thing you're replacing it in. So you'll notice that if we were to just try to search for this portion of the string inside the request URI, it's not going to work because we've got this index.php at the end of it. We need to get rid of the index.php portion of the string. So the easiest way to do that is to use the function dir name. So put that inside there. No. What you should be seeing is it should be still hitting that index page. You shouldn't see a redirect. I mean, it's weird because it says redirect status, but that's an actual HTTP status of 200. You should get a blank white page, unless you're var dumping, Scott, and then you should see some sort of information. You got that after you started running the mod? Yeah. Oh, it wasn't running before? Okay. Yeah, you should get a blank page unless you're outputting data. You can always just write a var dump inside there. We're going to establish that in a few seconds here. Let's finish writing this resolved path, and then we'll var dump it, and if you don't see the URL, then it's not working. So let's, inside the dir name, we're going to give it an argument. We're going to pass in our first server reference to PHP self. So that's this URL that I'm trying to pull right here. Or this path, I should say, not URL, this path. I'll zoom in on that page a little bit so you can see what we're working with here. There you go. So the next thing I want to do is pass the thing I want to replace. So I'm just going to replace it with an empty string. I mean, you could also replace it with null, but I think it might actually type... Does it type null in? I can't remember. And then the haystack. And the haystack will be server request URI will be our haystack. And then we'll var dump that to see if it works. And I'll give you that code as well. So this is going under step 2. So I'm going to save that and refresh my screen. And right now I'm getting an undefined variable resolved because it's actually resolved path, not resolved. There we go. So change that from resolved to resolved path. And if it works, you should see contact show 123. And if it works for you, you can go on break. We'll break to... Let's take a break till 4:25, and then we'll come back and finish everything off. Line 15? Line 15 is just your connect.php page, which should already be in there for you. Nope. Nope. The only lines we've written are these two lines here so far. Jesse, you're running this on a virtual server, right? That you created in a Docker container?
Hey, no, yeah, mine's just in localhost out of the Apache in my regular computer, but I had installed them side by side, so I'm just making sure that module was correctly installed and activated.
Oh, the mod, whatever it's called. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, from Htaccess. Yeah.
I think Apache tells you that.
Yeah, it does show. But mine is not. I cannot find a mod rewrite C. I have a mod rewrite SO and a mod rewrite H header file.
I'm not sure what SO files are. The header file might be the correct one, though.
Okay, I'll give those a try.
Yeah.
Yeah, SO are just what I have for all of my all the modules in the Apache for me. When you install it, I guess when you install it separately, this is how they're packaged.
Oh, okay.
They're all like that.
Yeah. Yulia, yes, that's correct. Dhruv, that's correct. Yeah, that's good. Scott, yours is not working. Yours gives a string of weak % 209 API contacts 123. Code is exactly as yours. Alex, it might be your Htaccess file. Make sure your Htaccess file looks identical to mine. So you should have this in your Htaccess file. Steph, yours just shows a slash. Did you only go to API, or did you go to API/contact/show/123? Till 4:25, Yulia. Yeah, there you go. Nice. Alex, which server are you running as well? That's weird that you have that % sign. Oh, no, it's not weird. You know why it's not working for you? You have a space between week and 09 inside your files. That's what that %20 means. Replace that %20 with like a dash or something. I think that might be breaking the Htaccess file. I don't know how, but it might be. I mean, the Htaccess file shouldn't care, but... Okay. Harshal, are you using WAMP? Okay, so that's fine, Alex. Try adding contacts/show/123 to the end of it, and then you should see the rest of those directories. Yours shows null, Harshal. Make sure that your variable name is the same name that you're dumping and it's correct, and make sure that you have you know what, I'm just going to copy and paste this. Make sure you have this exact same code. Yeah, no problem, Alex. That's nice, actually, that you found that, because I teach this again in the next class, and I'll know how to resolve that if I hit it. Till 4:25. Yeah. Yeah, Harshal, that sounds more like you're having a code issue, so just make sure your code is the same as my lines of code. Okay, so then if you add /contact/show/123 to the end of the URL, you should see the rest of it. Awesome. All right, I'm going to pause and mute myself and go get some water. All right, and we are back. Okay, so far what we have done is create an Htaccess file that hijacks any of the path information somebody puts into the address bar, redirects that person. Well, it doesn't even redirect. It actually forces the render of the index.php page. So we don't wind up redirecting to the index.php page because that's not good. Instead, what we do is we just redirect our request. We're actually pathing that request to the index.php, and it's Apache that's actually doing it. The Htaccess file allows us to override Apache's settings. We're essentially telling Apache what we want to do. So awesome. So now when we get the request through our index.php file, we're able to get just the piece that we want. The only piece we don't want all of this, right? We don't want localhost comp1006, lesson 9, or even the API, right? Because the API would be the root folder. What we want is just the contacts, show, and 123, because all we want is the resource, which is our contacts, the action, which is our show, and the parameters, which is 123. So those are the three pieces that we want from the URL that's being given to us. That's it. Nothing more. Also nothing less. So the next thing we want to do is actually take this URL and break it apart into its separate components. Does anybody know the PHP function to break those apart into separate components? How do we break a string apart into an array? I know you know this because I saw it. Saw it in one of your slide decks. Yes, explode! Kablooey! We're going to explode. How do you turn it back into a string? Do you know that one? Yes, implode. Aren't those awesome names? So every other programming language ever uses split and join, but PHP uses explode and implode. Everybody else uses split and join. But okay, whatever. We'll take what we get. So this var dump, we'll get rid of this var dump because we don't need it anymore, and we'll just keep our resolved path. Okay? In step 3, down here, we're going to break our resolved path apart. So we'll create a variable called parts, and we'll make it equal to explode, and we're going to explode the resolved path. Nope, sorry, I forgot the first argument. The first argument is the slash. So we're going to break it apart by this slash. Now, I'm not sure if it's different for you if you're on a Mac. Just pay attention to how this is actually formatted. If your slashes are the other way, then you want to make sure that your delimiter that you're passing is facing the other way. Okay? I just caught that Yulia said no. You didn't learn how to explode a string? Well, now you know how. Now you know how to explode a string. And if we var dump it, I mean, this is my favorite word in the world, var dump. Just take a dump on your PHP here. There we go. And you can see the 4 parts that we get. Now, you might be like, why do we get 4 parts? Because we have a slash contact slash show slash 123. Why is there 4 parts? And the reason is because the first slash actually results in the new line or whatever is before it being rendered as an empty string. It's not a problem. This is predictable. Because it's predictable, we'll just make sure that we write our parts out based on that predictability. So let's break our parts into their actual pieces. So the first one we'll just call root. And we'll say that's this empty string. It's just the root. We're not actually going to use it. We don't even necessarily need to define it. I'm just defining it just so you guys know what it is. The next one is going to be our resource. And a resource is usually the representation of the data that somebody is looking for. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be something in the database, but it is connected to data that they're likely trying to seek, right? So our resource in this scenario is contacts. So we're going to do $parts and 1. The action is the next one, and that's show. And I'm just using show as an example. We might have other actions. We also might not have an action passed to us. So it is common for them to send GET requests to /contacts, and that to be interpreted as the index action. So what we're going to do here is we're going to write action, like so, equals. And you know what? We'll use a ternary. I did this a little different in my notes, but we'll use a ternary for this. We're going to basically check to see if $parts2 is empty. And if it is, then what we'll do is we will assign index. Otherwise, we'll assign $parts2. So this is called a ternary statement. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. But essentially, you have a condition. You check that condition. If that condition is true, then you return this value. If it's false, then you return this value. Okay? And these are implicitly returned, both of these. It doesn't mean that you're restricted to returning a value. You can just do a function call. Just understand that no matter what, whatever happens with the function call, it's going to be implicitly returned. Have you guys seen ternaries before or worked with ternaries in other programming languages or in PHP? Yeah? Cool. And then the last piece we want is the params. Now the params can be empty. So they might only pass in contacts and not actually pass in anything else, right? See how we have nothing else? So how do we capture that? That gets a little trickier, right? So we need to be able to capture params. If they're not there, we should just stub it out with an empty array. Okay? So in this one, we're going to do is set $parts3. And again, this will be a ternary. If it's set, we're going to use something called array slice. And what array slice will do is it cuts a piece of the array off and returns it. So the first part is the array. So the first argument is the array we want to slice. The second argument is the offset, which is what index do we want to start our slice on, right? So the index we want to start it on is 3. And how much of the array do we want to slice? Well, we want to slice all the way to the end of the array, so we just give it the length of the array. And the easiest way to do that is to just count the array. That will actually return back the number of elements inside the array. Otherwise, we return an empty array. So I'll write a var dump here, and we'll dump out our parts. So root, resource, action, and params. And then I will copy this block of code for you and give it to you. While you guys are either finishing typing that out or pasting it in place, I'm going to hit refresh. And as you can see, the first part here, which is our root, is empty. Our resource is contacts. Our action is show. And then we have this little array here with 1, 2, 3 inside of it, right? And that's our parameters. If I change this to just /contacts and hit enter, our params are empty. And if I go to the root of our API, you'll notice that we have an empty params. We have index defined as our resource, but everything else is currently empty. So that's, yeah, that is the correct action. That's a good one. So cool. So if I go to contacts, I should have index as my action. If I go to show, I have show as my action. And if I add 1, 2, 3, I get 1, 2, 3 as params, and anything else I add, right? Gerard Butler is the bomb. Yo. There we go. See, look at all our params. So everything else we have will always get added as parameters. So this is extremely versatile and can be used with anything. Cool? Cool. Our next step, as part of our API, and this is super fundamental, is we need to interpret what kind of requests they're making. Are you just wanting to read data, or are you wanting to manipulate data? Now, we're not going to get into, building it out so that we can use put and delete and all those type of methods. Instead, we're only going to care about get and post. So the way we're going to learn which particular method they're using is by using another server value. I did paste it in the chat. It's literally right above you. Nope, I pasted it to MIDI. He's the only one who gets it. Sorry, hold on. Let me fix that. You see, I was cocky and I shouldn't have been. There you go. Now everybody gets it. Okay. Let's write our HTTP method checker, and we're going to use one of the server variables in order to figure out what method they're using. Does anybody know which one it is? Does anybody have it on the top of their head? Which one of the properties of the server request? I almost said it. No, it's not get. No, it wouldn't be so specific. You're on the right track. Request / No, not post. That's too specific. We want to know which one of the HTTP methods are being used. We don't want to have to check them individually. Yes, there we go. Method. Request method. And if we var dump that, out of curiosity, what's it going to be? What's the value going to be when I refresh? Which request method are we using right now? That's right. We're using a get method. There we go. Get. Oh, we need to clean up these var dumps. Right? So line 33, get rid of that var dump. Don't keep them around because they will break our application. So we can't have them just kind of floating about. All right, so our next check, now that we have that request method, and I will share that with everyone. There you go. Our next check is essentially to just make sure that a resource has been passed. So if they come to our page and they are not accessing our contacts or any other resource we've defined, we're just going to say, okay, cool, you do you, we'll just respond with a 404. So if you access the page and you haven't specifically defined a resource you want to access, then we're going to 404 on you. That's what's going to happen. So we're going to stub this part out. We're going to say if $resource, meaning that you have asked for a resource, then we want to dynamically access the controller of the resource that you're accessing. So notice that both of these resources we have here both have a controller. How could I dynamically grab the controller and load it into my PHP page? So I've got a variable. This is kind of a logic question here. I've got a variable called $resource, and I want to include one of these two controllers. But I don't want to have to include them both, and I don't want to call them explicitly. I want to dynamically load them. How would I dynamically load one of them based on the value of resource? So you have all the tools and all the knowledge currently that we've done over the last 2 weeks at least, Evan, in order to do this. Let's see if you can figure this out. How would you dynamically load that resource? And I'll give you a hint. It's literally one line. Yeah, you can require them, but are you going to require them both, Alex? because we're going to wind up with conflicts if we do that, because they're both going to have the same function calls in them. So, yeah, we can do require once, but which one do you require? Let me walk you down the logic path here. What is the value of resource? Yep. What is the name of the directory that holds the controller for that resource? So I'll say this much. MIDI is partway there. We have require once. We are definitely going to use that function. But what code am I going to stick inside of it? What argument does require once take? What is the argument? Like, what's the format of the argument? Yeah, it's a file call, right? It's literally pointing to a file, right? Are you following my train of thought here? So we know the file that we want to access is called controller.php. But we can't just call controller.php, right? And we know that these are the two directories that contain that file. We don't know which one is going to be called. So we don't want to just call contacts controller.php, because that means that then we would have to go if resource equals contacts, then require this file. We don't want to do that. We can make this much simpler. Nope, we're not going to do that either. You guys are going to kick yourselves when I show you what we're going to do. The value of resource right now is contacts. If I go to Chuckisms, the value of resource will be Chuckisms. So all I need to do is provide the variable there, and I'm in the correct directory. So if I go to contacts, I'm going to load the controller for contacts. If I go to Chuckisms, I'm going to load the controller for Chuckisms. And what's really funny is all the frameworks you will ever use, they basically under the hood do this exact thing. This logic, this kind of paradigm, is the exact paradigm they're doing. As weirdly simple as it seems. So this is going to load our contacts, because that's the value of resource right now, and that controller, and include it in here. And the reason why we want to do that is because we want to make sure that our methods that we're going to provide to the end user are the same. They don't all have to be the same, but at least the common ones should be. So for example, index, which will retrieve all contacts. Show, which will receive one specific contact. Create, update, and delete, which will do the exact same things that they're supposed to do. They will all do create, read, update, and delete. It doesn't matter how many resources we add in here. They will all do the same things, right? And all those function calls can be literally named the same. And because of that, we can make this super, super meta, we'll call it. So this is our first intro into meta programming. Meta programming basically means why write the same logic more than once if we can just dynamically tweak it in order to access the things we need to do. So the next thing, we're accessing the controller for the source that we want, for the resource we want. Our next step is to call the function, which is actually the action that the user has provided. We want to call that action. But we don't want to just call it. We want to make sure that we're only calling the action if they have sent the correct HTTP method. So I find the easiest way to do this is to use a switch. And we're going to provide it action. So what is the value of action right now? Does anybody know? What is the value of action? We know the value of resource is contacts. What is the value of action? Yep, it's show, exactly. So we're going to write a case in here for show, but we're also going to write a case in here for search, because that's another method we're going to allow. and we're going to write a case in here for index. So we're going to have 3 cases in here. What's neat about switches is if this is true, or this is true, or this is true, it will execute any of the code above the break. And then we're going to write another one in here. We're going to do a case for create, a case for update, and a case for delete. And again, we'll add a break. So quite a bit of logic there. Let me just capture all that logic for you. And we'll paste it in here. So essentially what's going to happen is we're going to get our resource. We're going to load the controller for that resource just by using a bit of a trick, right? To navigate through the directory and grab that. So as you can see, naming conventions, super, super important, because if we didn't call this contacts, this wouldn't work, right? So we're being very specific. This switch here is going to take a look at the action the user has provided. So they provided show explicitly. If they don't provide an action, it'll be indexed. Either way, it doesn't matter. All we care about right now is the type of HTTP method they've loaded, because if it's wrong, we want to 404 it and say, nope, you sent a GET request to delete something. That is incorrect. Or you sent a POST request for us to show you information. That is incorrect. So it's our way of being able to warn them. It's like validation, right? We're validating the request, and if they don't send the correct HTTP request, then we say, nope, sorry, we're not loading it. You 404'd. Before we do that, we need to write that simple function that we were talking about earlier at the top of our page. It's our response function, because I don't want to have to dictate the response every single time, right? It's a lot of information. So the easiest way to do it is by just creating a response function. So let me show you what would go into the function, and then we'll move the logic to the top of the page. The first part of the function is going to need the response code. So we define that by doing HTTP response code, and then we use the HTTP response code from the list of response codes that are available, which you can always do a search for. But the one for not found is, does anybody know what it is? What's the response code? It's a number for not found. Exactly, it's a 404. So we're going to give it a 404. Then we're going to send a header. And we can send as many headers as we want. You guys have used this before. You'll remember that you typed location into it and then gave a path, right? That's how you do a simple redirect. But the header we're going to type in is actually telling the responder, like the client when we respond back to it, what data type we're responding with. So the data type we're going to respond with is content type, application, spelled correctly because it will get mad if you don't, /JSON. So we're going to respond with JSON. JSON is better known as self-describing data. It is literally the foundational communication method for APIs and microservice systems, right? It's how we can allow two computers to talk to each other even though they don't speak the same language. JSON is universal. That's the important note. So everything we want to respond in, we want to respond with JSON because we don't know that our client is PHP. I mean, we do, but we can't guarantee that that will be the only thing ever accessing our application. So we need to respond in something that all applications can understand. And JSON is a universal language. And then the last piece we need to do is just output that JSON response. So we use echo to do that. And that will actually return, sorry, it's not message, that will return our message as JSON to our requester. Now this has to be in JSON format, so we're just going to do status like that. So there you go. So we're passing in an array here. Though it's not actually an array, it's called an associative array, which is more similar to a JavaScript object or a Java object. So quite a bit of information. HTTP response code, which is the HTTP response code that we're going to send back with our request. The content type that we're going to use to send the request back, so we're going to send it back as JSON. If we were sending HTML, we would send back text/HTML. Okay? If we were sending CSS, it would be text/CSS. And then we need to output. This is the equivalence to just us returning something, but by echoing it, it actually sends the response. It triggers that response to go back to the requester, which would be our client. And we're responding with JSON data. So JSON encode will take this associative array and convert it into JSON for us. Now, we're going to take those 3 lines of code and we're going to cut them. So I'm going to hit Control X to cut them. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll all the way to the top of my page and I'm going to create a new function and I'm going to call it response. It's going to take an argument for code and an argument for message. And then I'm going to paste my pieces in here and line them up better. I'm going to replace the 404 with code. And I'm going to replace this block in here, the JSON encode, with $message. So that way we can send it back. And that's our function call. Now we'll use that function inside our responses. Not only just the responses for our switch, but also we can actually use this response function in our controllers as well because it will be available to it because it's been defined outside of it. It is now almost globally scoped. All right, you guys ready? Down the page we go. Let's go do our responding. So in here, we just write response, which is the name of that function, 404, and then we give it that weird kind of associative array. There we go. And it's going to be literally the same one for the post action as well. But obviously we need a condition. We don't just want to respond. I don't know why I forgot to do this. We're going to say if the request method does not equal get, then we want to respond with this 404. Now I'm going to wrap this in curly braces, but believe it or not, if you're only doing one line expression in your if, you can actually leave those off. It will only execute the absolute following line. I've done that in the past, and I mean, I've had students that don't really like it. They just find it confusing because they think that the break would be affected as well, but it's not. It's only the immediate line that gets affected. But you guys write how you choose to write. So there we go. That's our complete switch statement. Yay, yes. Let's paste our switch. And then we have one line left for our whole application. And that's the bottom line here, which is a return call user func array. And what this thing allows us to do is call a function by a string. So we can pass it a string. It will look for the function in the stack. If it finds the function in the stack, it will execute it. So we're going to pass it $action, which is the name of our function, and then our parameters. Another little chunk of metacode. Crazy. So if I refresh right now, this is just going to break. because we don't have, it says parameter 1 to be a valid function called show. We don't actually have show defined yet. We're going to define that in our controller. Yep, action will be our function. Why? We call it action because that tends to be the terminology they used. Yeah? Action is just a string though, right, Jesse? Action is just a string, so action will actually contain the value show, right? And then we're passing that value of show as a string to the call user func array. What it will do is look for a function in the stack called show, and then it will execute it and pass it our parameters. It's how you can dynamically call functions. It's really, really cool. So what we're going to do now is we're going to define a function called show. Where are we going to define that function? Where would we define our function? Let's see if you guys are following that logic. Yes, in the controller. Exactly, in the controller. So in the controller.php file for contacts, we're going to create a show action. And then that show action will execute when we hit this method. This file is doing some crazy, crazy, crazy ass shit. But it's so awesome. This is meta programming at its finest. And it's great. I mean, we could definitely get way more complex than this. But this is as simplified as I want to get. However, what we've done here, so that you guys understand, is fundamentally the same thing they do in large-scale frameworks, right? So when, are you guys taking ASP this semester? ASP and C# MVC? Is that this semester? No. Okay. So you guys will have an ASP MVC semester where you actually do ASP MVC. You also do in that same semester Intro to JavaScript. Oh, you're doing C#. Are you doing it as MVC though? Like Model View Controller? Jesse says no. Scott says yes. Ness. Yes. Yeah, so I think you guys do. Who do you have? Do you have Scott or Rich? I mean, Rich Freeman? I don't know who that is. I've never met them. So usually Rich teaches that class, and he does MVC. What tends to happen though with a part is DACA a part-time instructor or a full-time instructor? Or do you know? Okay, if they're part-time, likely they have Rich's material, because that's usually the way it works. Rich will pass off his material. Anyways, if you guys are doing MVC, it doesn't actually get under the hood because you wind up working with a framework and it kind of does all the heavy lifting for you. So you don't see how routing works. You don't see what controllers are. You do build models though, so you do get to see what models are. You will write controller logic. It's just the connections are kind of done for you. This gives you insight into what's actually happening underneath the hood. They have a file that does rewriting, just like our Htaccess file, except for in C# they call it the config file. I think it's just config, but it's like for web servers, because you guys are probably using IIS to serve those. Well, it depends. I don't think you have to use IIS, but it's not Apache usually. I can't remember what it's called. Anyways, you use some other server to serve it. And so you'll configure a file that will do rewrites, right? But you won't likely write that file. It'll already be written for you. Stuff like that. Yeah, I think it's at the end of your semester. Oh, actually, you would have done it by now, I would think. So maybe you're not doing it. Or maybe I'm totally confused, and this course is the one that replaced C++, and your ASP Web one is coming. LinQ this week. Oh, linking, yeah. Yep. Alright, so as complex as this seems, this is actually super, super simple in the realm of MVC. Very, very simplified. And it's not going to wind up on a test, but it is handy information to know. One thing I would definitely suggest is what we finish with tonight, put it in your resumes. Like, put it in your portfolio. This is not stuff that we have people coming to us with at LMG. They don't present this type of stuff. Hey, we built our own model view controller system or anything like that. That to me impresses me when I meet a client, like a potential employee that has done things like that and built their own MVC, built their own platforms, their own content management systems, and not just rolled one that already exists. I find that more impressive than somebody setting up WordPress. Okay. Anyways, so we've got all this in place. I would copy this and put it into Pastebin. I tried this the other day and it just basically said no. It was like, no, you're a filthy hacker, get out of here, is essentially what it said to me. So let me see if I can do it today. But I bet you it won't let me. Oh, it did! Yes, it did. Awesome. What? No, don't go to that spreadsheet. I don't even know what that spreadsheet is. Oh, it's for linear and spline calculations. Here we go. There you go. That's our index PHP as it stands right now. It is going to break just because we're missing the function call. So we're not going to start with contacts because contacts is actually kind of a big controller. Instead, we'll start with chuckisms. So I would like you to load the chuckisms controller. And then to access the chuckisms functionality, we just need to replace our URL up here with API/chuckisms. Okay? I'll give you the URL, though yours is different, but I'll give you the URL just so you can see the format and the spelling. So in here we have one step. We are going to connect to the Chuck Norris API, grab the content from the Chuck Norris API, and load it. Now, pre-warning. If you're not a fan of swearing, the Chuck Norris API on occasion spits out some kind of nasty stuff. So you might have to hit refresh. It used to be very good. It used to not contain bad things, but somebody's changed it over the years. And it's so difficult to find just completely open-ended APIs that don't require tokens anymore. So I haven't changed it yet. So hopefully you're not easily offended. If you are, you don't need to do this step. So I'm going to JSON decode. Actually, no. We're going to get our response. I'm not going to do it this way. We're going to do our response first. And we're going to use a PHP method called FileGetContents. And what it does is it essentially creates a request, requests the contents, and then loads them in for us. The URL that we're going to use to load those for the API endpoint is this. So copy that URL and then paste it inside there. So that's going to retrieve the Chuck Norris API. And I completely forgot, but we need to wrap this entire thing in a function that we'll just call index. So we're going to use one of our method names, our requests, our action names, right, called index. So right now if I hit refresh, it's not going to do anything because we're not responding really, but at least it loads a blank page. Now I want to be able to return a response. So we'll return a response. It's a successful response, so we'll give it a 200. And then we need to decode the actual JSON here. So decode $response. So that's our entire function. Not too elaborate. This is going into chuckism/index.php. There you go. So now if I hit enter here, I will get a chuckism. It takes a couple of seconds to load. And if you look, there's a bunch of different pieces. Like there's categories created at, the icon URL that you can look at so you can actually see the Chuck Norris PNG. The identifier, it looks like they're using a Mongo database based on that ID that's there. The last time that one was updated, which was in 2020. The URL that was used, so that if you wanted to just grab that one value by its ID, you could. What I would recommend doing is creating a show method, though. And then the value. It is rumored that Billy May's last words were that he thought he was starting to look like Chuck Norris. Which is only funny if you know who Billy May is. Every time you refresh this, by the way, you will get a different random joke. Jesus can walk on water. Chuck Norris can swim through land. Now, interestingly enough, I've also connected this to our client. If you go to the client, this first error here is where the Chuckism should show up. If you click refresh, you'll now get the Chuck Norris quote. Chuck Norris sits on his TV and watches the couch. But we still have this broken link, and that's because it's connected to contacts. Which we better motor because it's already 5:04. Are we good? Did everybody get their Chuck Norris? Steph got an error? What's your error, Steph? Your error is never mind? Got it. Nice. Alright, I'm going to close these off. Oh, awesome. Yeah, sometimes they do. Sometimes they have a really nice UI so that you can actually like click through and stuff. It's pretty cool. Contacts. Let's go back to contacts. We're going to start nice and simple because we did create contacts last week. So just go to API/contacts and then load in our controller. And we're just going to write our index function first because our index function is nice and simple. We have contacts in our database from last week when we were actually creating the contacts and doing validation. So we're just going to load in the same ones. Of non-object on line 90. You're talking about this error or the top error up here? Oh. Yeah, you shouldn't be getting that error. Make sure in your Chuckisms, Yulia, that you are adding JSON decode. Because if you don't decode the response from the Chuck Norris API, it won't get returned in the proper format. So that could be the issue, is that it's not decoding it properly for you. I'll copy this function again and paste it in. I did it before, but just in case. You got it now? Awesome. All right, so index action to retrieve all the contacts. Nice. So first of all, our index action is called index, and that is the most common thing when we're doing REST APIs, is these words actually mean something. They have semantic meaning behind them. So index actually means an index of all of a resource, right? So the index of all of a resource means all of those records. Oh, you have that code and you still have an error? Okay, well, we'll resolve it after this, okay? We'll take a look at it after the class. Because likely it's something weird with MAMP and your responses for some reason. Out of curiosity, though, Yulia, did it load in your API? Like when you went to Chuckisms, did it load in the API? Okay, so then, yeah, it's something weird with how it's getting sent to the client, and we'll have to look at that afterwards. All right, so for function index, we're going to write a try catch first, right? Oops, why did it put a slash there? I don't want a slash. Oh, because it's escaping the name space. This is the simple setup for our thing, and in our try catch, all of our try catches are going to do the same thing. They're just going to return responses, 404s, and they'll all look like this. Issue retrieving results will be the error message. And then there'll be an errors array. I'll give you this in 1 second here. And we'll pull the error from it. There we go. So kind of a multi-nested associative array there. There you go. So let's start with that. And we're going to use the same thing for show and search as well, but we'll start with this first. All right, so this is a super simple one. The first thing we need to do is actually write our SQL statement. And our SQL statement is controlled. So because it's controlled, we don't need to worry about bound parameters. And that makes that super easy on us because all we need to do is grab the data information. Now, I did make a slight change in our contact, and I actually created a function that wrapped our database because that's a better solution than just a variable. So we're going to use DBO as the function call. That's our connection. We're going to call query and pass it SQL. And then we're going to immediately pass the fetch all and the type of association we want, which is a fetch ASOC. I don't know if you guys have used that before. By the way, you can enter these onto the next line if you don't want them all taking up all that space, like so. So query is like, basically it just fires off the SQL command directly to the database. So you don't need to actually create a statement. You don't need to do a preparation or anything like that. The reason we don't need to do that is because we don't have any bound parameters. So there's no reason to have all the rest of that information in there. So we can do this nicely by just calling query. Query will return back its statement already, and then we can immediately call fetch all on it. This process of doing these multiple commands in a row, does anybody know what that's called? What's it called when we connect all of these different commands in a row? Yeah, exactly. It's called chaining. So we're literally chaining onto each one. So this returns our database connection. This returns our statement. This returns our result set. And they just keep chaining onto each other. After that, we can go ahead and return our response 200 or 202 and then pass in our result, which will automatically be converted from a fetch ASOC into an actual JSON object. Whoops. Hate how things just kind of slide about. Yeah, error should be E, but actually even better than that, E should be error. Would be better, Jesse. Thank you for noticing that. I didn't catch that. There we go. I don't like E. I don't like variables with just like silly names like A, B, C, D, E. I know that E is an error. I get that. But I like to be explicit because if this exception involves connecting to Datadog, processing a whole format, and then sending that off to Datadog or some logging service or something like that, we may be like 15, 20 lines down and not have any idea what E means anymore. So by actually taking E and calling it error, it's better because it's explicit and then we know exactly what it is. Or even error, like ERR is way better, yeah. I like being explicit when I do programming. So now I've got a syntax error, retrieving results. Access violation, you have an error in your SQL syntax. Check the manual that corresponds to your MySQL, because I did select star from. What am I missing? Kind of helps if you have the freaking table. Oops. There we go. I don't know if you guys have done this kind of chaining before. I don't think you have. I was looking at Jess's notes and it looks like you guys have always done preparations. Yeah. Do you understand why you don't have to do a preparation here? Like, does it make sense why preparation is just overkill in this scenario? Exactly. We have no input from the user inside our SQL statement. There's no input coming from them at all. So there's no reason for us to go through all that heartache just in order to grab some data from the database, right? The second they give us an ID or anything like that, then you bet your boots that we gotta fix that, right? And bind it and so on and so forth. But this, we're controlling anyways. Alright, so I did paste the function there. Let's go down and write show now. So function show. And show is going to take an argument. It's going to take an ID. And that's cool because our index page is actually going to send it to us as params in an array, right? But what's kind of interesting, when call user func array gets executed, what it actually does with those parameters is it splats them. Splat's kind of a weird word, but essentially what it means is it flattens them as an argument list, so they're no longer in an array. It's just literally an argument list. Okay, so it splats them, it spreads them for us. JavaScript actually has spread built in, which is super cool. Gonna do that try catch thing again. Only I'm gonna write it all on one line and then split it apart afterwards. Because that's what multi-cursors are for. Holding down Alt, clicking to create another cursor, boom. We've got multi-cursors. And I'm just gonna copy this error message from the one above because I'm a super lazy programmer and don't feel like writing it out again. Only I'm going to change the verbiage. Issue retrieving results. One letter changes that whole expression, right? Issue retrieving result, because we're returning a singular result. Now, unfortunately, we have more of an annoyance. Now we need to write our SQL, but this time we are taking in input. So it's still select star from contacts, but we have a where clause this time. So we'll use bound parameters like good little programmers. I'm going to stretch this out a bit just so everything's kind of longer. Let's write a statement. Oh, DBO. And we will prepare our SQL statement. That returns the statement, and then we can go ahead and bind our one parameter. And incidentally, I think these could even be chained. I haven't actually tried it yet, but I'm pretty sure they can be because they're just returning statement each time. So as long as this function, bind param, returns the statement object, then you can again just keep calling the chain, right? So this will return a statement object. This, I believe, returns the statement object. And then execute, I think, also returns the statement object. So we're going to call execute here. And then result will be the thing that returns something different. So we probably could get away with chaining all that together. But it does kind of remove readability a little bit, I guess. But I don't know. I don't know. Oh, PDO param int is kind of like a sanitization, Alex. So what happens is when we bind the parameter, we're binding ID to the MySQL expression. This is our variable. It's going to get plugged in here. This is a caster. It's literally going to cast ID as a number. If ID isn't a number, it's going to get cast to an empty null. So this is like your sanitization. Yeah. And I like this because this sanitizes without you having to explicitly sanitize. It just does it all inside your bind parameter. I thought we talked about this last week. Did we not? Maybe I forgot. I might have forgot. Sometimes I think I've done something and then realize I have not. Now there's some... So JSON, just to let you know, a JSON object is represented with curly braces. Okay? An array, just like every other language, is represented with square brackets. Because PHP deals with associative arrays, so for example, if I had an array, if I had an object in JSON, it would look like this. I'm typing it out in the chat. So it would look like this, right? But if I had the object in PHP, it would look like this. Those are the same thing. The problem is, though, is that when JSON decode goes to decode it, encode it, it instead treats it like an array. So it doesn't get encoded correctly. If I give JSON decode a set of empty curly braces, it won't turn those into an object. Instead, it blows up and says, that's an error, I don't know what that is. So what we have to do instead, which is really silly, is we have to write logic that normally we wouldn't have to write. So if there's no result, then we're going to JSON decode these curly braces, which will then get decoded as a proper object and stored into result, because we can't give square braces here because it treats it like an array. And then we're going to return the response of 202 or 200 $result. So there we go. We've got everything in place and all those things. So if we want to test this, I'll copy the function so that you have it before I do my test. Okay, so there's our function. So if you want to test this, you're going to go to /contacts/show, and then you're going to need to choose one of these IDs. So I'm going to choose ID 10. And if it worked, then you should load just that one person. If you choose an ID that doesn't exist, so say we do ID 1, you'll get back an empty object. And it's fine if you don't know what an object is. That's totally fine. I don't expect you to know any JavaScript type stuff, or even JSON for all that matter. Cool. We have one last piece, which is kind of funny because this stupid one last piece that I created, unfortunately, I didn't do a front end piece. I only did the back end piece. So we don't have a front end portion for it. You get square brackets with a set of curly braces inside it? Yeah, that's weird. That's super weird. I'm going to have to look at your code, Yulia. There's something weird there. If you use my function, if you replace your code with my function, does it work properly, or does you still get the same thing? What's my path? The path I am currently looking at to get that is this. So I'm choosing an ID that I don't have. Anyway, all right. So we've got show. The last thing we're going to do is search. You ready for this? This one's a little bigger, but you guys seem very keen on learning how to do search with multiple terms. So we're going to do that try catch thing again, right? Try catch exception $error blam. Couple of alts, whammy, go be lazy programmers, and copy the return from above. And this time, again, it would be results. Issue retrieving results. Totally fine. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that the term that people have given us has been sanitized. We don't want to just accidentally jam things into our database, right? Or have any problems. We should be sanitizing it. So we can do that right off the get-go. We could call sanitize. You know what, though? We don't need to because the bind param will do it. Never mind. We're not going to be redundant. We're going to select star from contacts where, and this is where everything gets kind of crazy, fname like, which you guys already know how to do, but then you guys have been doing these weird concatenations where you do this kind of thing, like you do a %, dot, term, dot, percent sign thing. I'll show you an easier way to do that. So we can use the SQL command concat, and then in the SQL command, preferably written inside the quotation mark, Sean. There we go. Concat. Inside the SQL command, we can write our list of things we want to concat together. Like so. And then if we want to add other fields to actually search, we just write or and literally write the same thing all over again. Lname, like, concat, preferably written the other way, though it doesn't matter because there's no case sensitivity. Percent, term, percent. So that's your SQL statement. And that will actually search the database for both terms using concat. And it's fuzzy matched. So it will just search it by whatever terms you put in, right? So then obviously we want to DBO that, prepare it, prepare $SQL. Bind that parameter and also sanitize it, right? So we can do that in one line, which is super handy. Term and then sanitized. PDO : param _ string. That'll strip out any quotation marks. It'll strip out literally anything that's in there. And it will automatically make it a string literal. And then we'll go ahead and execute it. And then we'll store all our results just like we did last time. And I'm sure you guys are starting to think, hey, there's ways we could definitely dry this up, because there is quite a bit of redundancy. This is where something like an ORM really comes in handy, working with things like models and stuff. Again, we have that same issue. If $result, if there's no result, then we will store an empty array in result. So that way we're at least passing something back, because we don't want to throw an error. We just want to send back an empty array. Otherwise, we will return response as a 200 and the result set. Let's see if this actually works. Search, and my term, let's try ASD. Yeah, so I have 2 records with ASD. Let's try Sean. Do I have any records with Sean? Yeah, I've got a record with Sean. Let's make sure the last name's working. So if I do MCK, yep, same record comes back. Yeah, of course. So that's our search term. So Yulia, you were asking about being able to search multiple columns. Does that make sense? Yeah, I'll upload it into GitHub and then share the link. Yeah, no worries. I'll likely upload my notes version only because there's a lot of notes in there that are handy. There's a whole bunch of comments that kind of explicitly explain everything. I don't know. Hold on. That you may require something different, but let's try Sean McKinnon. No. It doesn't. It breaks. And the reason is that actually makes sense, because it's taking the term and it's searching the whole term against the username, like the first name or the last name. If you wanted to do that, it's a little different, and it's actually a little bit more complicated. What you would want to do you want to see how to do it? It's going to take a few seconds to put together. Okay. So the first thing we need to do with the term is we need to split it apart into pieces. You would want to concatenate the F name and L name from the database. No. Yes, you could do that too. You could concatenate those two pieces together with a space so that they search it, but that's not going to necessarily be as precise. What's the easiest ways to do this without getting way into... Okay, so we could do term parts equals explode. We want to explode the term, but by spaces. So you're going to explode it by a space, but you also want to trim it. Do we want to trim it? No, I think that works. So if we var dump term parts, we should get just Sean and McKinnon. Trying to look for where it's actually outputting the information. So I get an array. Oh, because of the 20%. So you see there's a few pieces you need to do here. So term parts. First of all, we need to fix term by calling, is it string replace? Yeah. String replace %20 in term. So with a space. I did this wrong. It's %20 with a space in term. There we go. Yeah, that works. So there we go. We've got Sean and then we've got McKinnon. So you want to split it apart into the two term pieces. So now you've got term parts, right? And then you're essentially going to call this whole select statement twice, right? So that way it doesn't matter. You're going to call it for as many times as you have those pieces. So we need a $results equals empty array to store our result sets, because that's where we're going to put our result sets. Then we're going to create a for loop. So we're going to say for each $term parts as, we'll just say T because we don't want to wind up with any collisions here. So $term parts as T. We're going to take literally this whole thing and move it into there. I will copy and paste this. And then what we want to say is with the results, we want to do $results. How do you push? Do you have to use array push? Is there a shorthand? There's a shorthand, right? It's that. How do I flatten the result? Is there an array flat in PHP? Not doing a recursive iterator. Not doing a walk. It's array merge. So we would want to take array merge. How does that work? That flattens it, but that's weird. Oh, I can give the first result set in. So we'll give it results, comma, and then flatten that one. All right, so that will replace results like so. Oh, that one's a weird one. Okay, so that's going to basically take our result set and add it to results, and then we're going to check results now. And if results is empty, or if results has anything, then we'll return it. So let's see if that works. And I'll get rid of this var dump as well. Okay, so that's fine. So function, so Sean McKinnon should return back Sean McKinnon. We're doing select star from, so we need to replace this with term, we need to replace this with the T. And there you go. So it works. So Sean McKinnon works, but so should just Sean. And so should if you reversed it. And if you also wanted to pull something else in there, you could just give it another expression. So if you give it ASDF, it'll also pull one of the ASDFs. It should have pulled Sean McKinnon and ASDF in there as well. So something's wrong with that logic, but I think I think this array merge is kind of goofy, and it keeps replacing the parts instead of just doing what I'm asking it to do. That needs work. The array merge needs work. I mean, if you wanted to make it super simple, you could just do this and jam the results into it. There's ways to flatten it. I just want to go through the whole process of flattening it. Yeah, you see there's everything now. And if I get rid of this piece, you just get the Sean McKinnon ones in place. Yep. I am entering that into the bar. Well, it's creating that. I'm entering it with spaces, and it's replacing my spaces with the 20%. All right, let me copy this whole function. So there you go. There's your super advanced search function. Now, honestly, if you were writing your own search algorithm, you would want to weight it, right? So what you would want to do is say, okay, this result set that came back contains the first name and the last name of these two search terms. So that one's a higher weighting than this one because it closely involves that name. So you would want to get more, I don't know, you want to get more creative and intelligent with it, but this is fine. This is super simple. So that's the thing. Even if your contacts table is empty, if you go to client now and click refresh, client should work now. And you should be able to create a new contact, Jesse. Because the create form is already made for you. So I'll just use your name, actually. I'm going to guess that you're 23. Am I right? Or am I wrong? And we'll just say it's jesse.rickman@gmail.com. And then your personal page is jessierocks.com. And then we'll create it. It'll say, are you sure? Click OK. It's going to take a second. And I'm hitting a blank page. This happened yesterday as well. And it was kind of... Oh, right. I see why. Do you see why? It's a blank page because we're currently using the wrong method. We're getting, we're not posting. So we need to post. So in our form, under client index, scroll to where the form is, which is down a bit, down a bit, down a bit more, down a bit. Could just do Control F, I guess. There we go. There's our form. We need to change the action, or not the action, the method to be post. Because right now it's get. We want a post method. So now if I refresh, there we go. And we'll do Jesse Rickman, age 21. Let's do 21. Email jess at hotmail.com. And then your personal page is http Jess needs SSL.com. Click OK. It's thinking about it. Why did it send to there again? I did the method as post. Did I forget to... It's hard refresh. If you ever wonder whether something didn't work, you can always right-click and choose to inspect. Yeah, so my method is post now. So now it should work. Now I'm just going to... I'm bored, so I'm just going to ASDF it. There we go, create. Okay. So that should have posted this time. Keeps going back. Oh! create a stream. The method is post. It's coming back, but I've got an error somewhere. That's the problem. I'm getting an error. So that's the thing. We can actually check to see why an error is occurring. We can do it using something that actually tests APIs, right? Because that's the problem. We're getting the error. We're not seeing what the error message is. I don't even think PHP sends anything back through the network tab for you to actually see what the problem is, which is kind of annoying. I have something. But you see, it gives me a 200, and that's irrelevant. I don't know what the response is. It doesn't mean anything to me. So what I want to do is actually send a post request, not using the PHP client, which is obfuscating what I can see, but actually using the some sort of other client like Hopscotch. Your mouse is dying, so I'm a bit all over the place. Sorry, I think someone answered this already, but are you going to upload the new completed file somewhere? Yes, I will. Yulia has 3 errors on a client page, and she has my code. She swears she has my code. My working code. If you have my working code, you shouldn't have errors. But I have an error right now, so that's not entirely true. So let's figure out what's going on. We can do that by using an application called Hopscotch. Hopscotch is really cool. Hopscotch actually allows us to send basically API requests over the internet to other things. You do need this extension, though. That's super important. So if you go to your API, click on the little extension link, and then click Add, it will add the proper URL for you. Right now, it always glitches on me for some reason. Why is it glitching? Oh, because I have all that extra stuff in there. So I just want to go to the /API. Come to Hopscotch. Come on. It doesn't like it because it doesn't end in .com. That's the problem. And there's no extension, so it's freaking out. Fine. I still need to know why it's not working. So that I can tell you guys why it's not working. We won't get into actually working with Postman, but I'm just going to use Postman to figure it out. Let's just make sure I can do a GET request. Yep. And let's try a post request. So I want to make sure I'm on the right API. Nope, that's not what you do. There we go. Contacts. Send. So it's returning the result set, but it's not actually... it's not creating for some odd reason. Oh! Duh. Need to put the action in. There it goes. Contact created successfully. Sorry about that. So under our index page, where our form is, and we can jump to the form by hitting Control F and typing in form. And that will get us to the form a little quicker. Our action should be set as create by default. So this null that's here should actually be called create, because that's technically what we should be going to. So now if I jump back here, inside here, and go back and refresh the page. Did I just crash my browser? Nope. Refresh the page. There we go. Now I should be able to create a new thing. Yes, I am sure. Oh, right. I have no idea what's happening. It's something to do with the stupid form. I'd have to figure it out. Alright, so, wow, there's a whole bunch of things here. Okay, I have 3 errors, and I think I have the right code. I have 4 errors. I have errors there too, but I've been typing as we go, so I may have made an error. I pasted mine into the extension pop-up. Will you be linking your GitHub link? Yes, I will. I've been typing along, but also replacing my code with Sean's code. Where is it? Where is what? Where is the GitHub link? The error I corrected? The error I corrected was in the form right here on the method. So in here, this silly line, hold on. On line 98, there's a ternary here. And I added the create into there. But it didn't correct it anyways. So it didn't wind up correcting it, Yulia, so it didn't work. Something glitched, and I'm not sure why. For some reason, it's not getting the create when it goes to post it to the other end. And I don't know why. Not without keeping you guys on the line for a half hour to figure it out, which I'm not going to do. For the most part, it works, and I have proper code anyways that I'm going to push up. That definitely works as well. If you want, though, I can troubleshoot your current errors, but it means I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen, and then you guys can share your screen. Yulia, you were first, so we'll go through yours. So I'm going to stop recording as well.